Imagine having the blueprint for a high-speed bullet train. Right. But then you look down and realize the tracks for your local tram are literally washing away in the rain.
Yeah, it's like you're planning for this hyper-modern future, but you can barely get across town today.
Exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive, coming to you straight from the newsroom of Addis Fortune, Ethiopia's largest English weekly newspaper. I'm your host, and we are sitting down with a massive stack of this week's reporting to just, extract the signal from the noise.
Right, and I'm excited to be here to help break all this down.
And just to be clear up front, our mission today involves exploring some major government economic plans and also some pretty severe federal corruption allegations.
And we are looking at these issues purely through the lens of the reporting provided in the paper. We're impartially analyzing the mechanics of what is happening.
Right, we aren't endorsing any political viewpoints here. We just want to understand how these systems actually work. So let's unpack this. Our overarching theme today is the intense, almost unbelievable friction of a nation in rapid transition.
It really is a paradox of a time. When you look at the macroeconomic blueprints, you see the architecture of a country that is attempting to modernize at a breakneck speed.
But then you look at the ground reality, and that transition is incredibly messy.
Oh, absolutely. It's jarring.
So we are going to take a journey today to figure out why that friction exists. We'll start on the local highways, see how that connects to global trade, get into the literal dirt of the agricultural fields, and then trace it all back to the courtrooms here in the capital.
It's a full circle.
It really is. So let's start with how people actually move around. The reporting from the Lamberette long-distance bus station paints a pretty grim picture.
It does, yeah. To understand this transition, you have to look at the transport sector, which is currently a study in extremes. I mean, traditional inner-city transport is facing what can only be described as a systemic collapse.
Right, and Lamberette is usually chaos, isn't it? Like shouting conductors, engines revving all the time.
Exactly, the usual hustle and bustle.
But now the reporters are finding clusters of Tata buses just sitting idle, and drivers swapping jokes just to, mask the anxiety.
Because the fares have essentially doubled.
Yeah. A ticket from Addis Ababa to Soto jumped from 700 to 1,300 birr in a matter of months. Like, how does a price hike like that happen so fast?
Well, it's the mechanics of a cascading global shock. Global headline inflation recently rebounded to around 13.4%. You have conflicts in the Middle East disrupting shipping lanes.
Which pushes up the cost of oil.
Right, exactly. And at the same time, fertilizer prices are spiking globally. But that abstract macroeconomic data lands at a rural bus window as a tangible daily crisis for the consumer.
And it's destroying the margins of everyday people. The paper highlighted this one trader, a military pensioner, trading butter from Shino to Addis Ababa.
Oh, I read that part.
And when his transport costs jumped from 100 birr to 250 birr for a single trip, his profit margins just vanished.
Yeah, he can't pass those costs on to his narrow customer base. They just won't pay it.
Right. Or you look at the students who suddenly can't afford to go home for Easter or family funerals. Families are literally being fractured. But what does this mean for the broader economy if people just stop traveling?
Well, what we are witnessing here is the mechanism of de-development.
De-development.
Yeah, a healthy economy requires arterial links, highways, rural roads, to connect surplus areas to deficit areas. When those links break down, the entire system suffocates.
Wow.
Rural areas supply up to 90% of Addis Ababa's food commodities. So when transport becomes unaffordable or gets bogged down by uncoordinated regional curfews, the farmer can't get their surplus to the market.
So the food literally rots in the field, while the urban consumer is paying artificially inflated prices at the market just because the supply chain is severed.
Exactly. It's a lose-lose scenario driven entirely by logistical friction.
Which is such a wild contrast to the government's 10-year perspective plan. The reporting notes they envision 1.5 billion inner-city trips a year by 2030.
Right. They want to standardize airports and expand railways.
It brings me back to that bullet train analogy. But hold on. If the diesel buses are sitting idle because no one can afford the fuel or the fares, how are we suddenly seeing this massive surge in electric vehicles on those exact same roads?
That is the other extreme of this transition. Following a federal restriction on fossil-fueled vehicles.
Which is essentially an aggressive policy to clear the market, right?
Yes, to force electrification. And because of that, there are now close to 100,000 EVs in circulation.
Okay, 100,000 sounds like a lot, but the paper notes that is still less than 5% of the total fleet. Yet that tiny percentage is completely breaking the insurance industry. Why?
Because the mechanics of risk are fundamentally different, and the insurance industry is still playing by a petrol-era rulebook.
How so?
Well, the National Bank of Ethiopia sets mandatory minimum insurance rates, but those calculations are entirely based on the risk profiles of internal combustion engines.
Meaning they know exactly how often a Toyota Corolla gets into a fender bender and exactly how much it costs to hammer out the dent.
Exactly. But EVs are a completely different animal. Up to 50% of an EV's entire value is concentrated in a single component.
Battery pack.
Right.
It's like trying to insure a modern smartphone using the rules of an old rotary phone. With a rotary phone, if you drop it, maybe the plastic shell cracks and you glue it back together.
Yeah.
But with a smartphone, if you drop it in a puddle, the motherboard shorts out and the entire thing is instantly worthless.
That is a perfect analogy. If an EV's undercarriage takes a hit on a bad road or gets water damage during the rainy season, you aren't just hammering out a dent, you are replacing the battery.
Which is half the cost of the car.
Right, and those astronomical replacement costs are compounded by severe foreign currency shortages and a total lack of specialized local mechanics.
The sources mentioned a couple of insurance companies trying to adapt by forcing customers to cover like 25 to 30% of battery replacement costs themselves in the event of a total loss. But it seems like insurers are mostly just crossing their fingers and relying on the law of large numbers, right? Hoping that as more EVs hit the road, the pool of premiums will eventually cover the massive repair bills.
But hoping isn't a sustainable financial strategy. To survive this, industry veterans are urgently calling for a shift to risk-based pricing.
Right.
They need models that account for battery degradation and chemical life cycles. Even more urgently, they need a centralized industry database.
Because right now they don't have one.
Right now, insurers have zero historical risk data for the new Chinese brands like BYD that are flooding the market. They are flying blind, pricing a fast-growing fleet on scarce data, literally learning the cost of risk one destroyed battery at a time.
Wow. Okay, but whether you are trying to subsidize fuel for a traditional Tata bus or trying to import a highly complex replacement battery for a new EV, it all requires foreign currency.
It does.
It all requires international trade. So let's pivot and look at the macroeconomic data in the paper. On the surface, the numbers look like a massive victory lap for the current reforms.
The headline figures are certainly notable. The data shows inflation easing to 13.2%, foreign exchange reserves recovering to $6.8 billion.
Which covers about 3 months of imports, right?
Yes, and the merchandise trade gap shrinking by $2.6 billion.
The African Export-Import Bank even named Ethiopia the fastest growing large economy in Eastern Africa. But wait, help me make sense of this. When you actually dig into the trade numbers, there is a massive structural paradox.
Which part stands out to you?
The paper notes that exports to the rest of Africa jumped by nearly 75% to $940 million.
Right.
That sounds incredible on paper. But then you realize that constitutes barely 2% of Ethiopia's total global trade.
It's a tiny slice.
Yeah, and the country is actively pushing tariff schedules under the African Continental Free Trade Area, which, just as a quick refresher for anyone listening, is a massive initiative to create a single continent-wide market to boost trade within Africa.
Yes, exactly.
They are also joining BRICS, the economic bloc with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, theoretically to hedge against Western protectionism.
Correct. Those are major strategic geopolitical moves.
Okay, but despite all these grand alliances, the math just doesn't add up. They are still importing $20.17 billion worth of goods globally, while only exporting $5.36 billion. If they are the fastest growing economy, why is the trade deficit still so stubbornly massive?
Well, this is where you have to look at the conflicting narratives surrounding economic bottlenecks. Institutions like Afreximbank tend to view the primary threats as external.
Okay, like what?
They look at things like Washington's reciprocal tariff frameworks, which heavily target textiles, and they argue that the key to closing that deficit is finding new markets, hence joining BRICS for better South-South cooperation.
But local insiders in the reporting are pushing back on that hard. They're arguing that market access isn't actually the core problem at all.
Right. The local perspective focuses on domestic supply constraints. The argument is, it doesn't matter how many free trade agreements you sign if you don't actually have anything left in the warehouse to sell.
Exactly. The paper points out that international buyers are constantly asking for more Ethiopian coffee, but the physical volumes simply aren't there to give them.
The supply just isn't keeping up.
Or look at gold. Gold now makes up nearly 40% of the country's exports, but an astonishing 98% of it is mined artisanally.
and that fundamentally caps how much value you can extract. Artisanal mining is manual, small-scale, and highly inefficient compared to corporate mining operations.
Right.
It's a mechanism of scale. If you had 50 large, mechanized firms running at high capacity, the paper suggests gold export earnings alone could theoretically hit $20 billion, wiping out that trade deficit entirely.
But the capacity just isn't there.
Exactly.
Which brings us right back to the ground level. Because resolving that domestic supply constraint doesn't begin in an international trade summit. It begins in the dirt, right? If you want to export more coffee, and if you want to feed those urban centers suffering from the transport gridlock we talked about earlier, you have to dramatically increase agricultural productivity.
And that introduces us to one of the most fascinating frictions in this week's reporting, the debate over the physical size of fertilizer bags.
Oh man, this one blew my mind. For the current production season, the federal government is distributing 10.7 million quintals of heavily subsidized fertilizer. We're talking an 84 billion burr subsidy aimed at stabilizing the prices of critical staples like teff, which is the vital local grain used to make injera, and wheat. That is a massive government intervention to boost the food supply. But there is a huge logistical catch. The fertilizer only comes in 50-kilogram bags.
Which sounds like a minor packaging detail until you understand the micro-reality of the Ethiopian farmer.
Right.
The average smallholder household cultivates less than half a hectare of land. In many cases, it's under a quarter of a hectare.
So giving them a 50-kilogram bag is like forcing someone to buy a 50-gallon drum of milk at wholesale when they only need a quart for the week and they don't even own a refrigerator.
Yeah, that's spot on.
Because they can't afford or use a 50-kilogram bag, the farmers are forced to buy what they call white fertilizer, which is urea, a highly nitrogen-rich fertilizer, informally. They buy it by the tin, which is about 1 kilogram.
And this is where the chemistry breaks down the economics. Urea is highly sensitive.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When it is sold piecemeal out of a tin, it is constantly exposed to direct sunlight and moisture during retail. That exposure causes a rapid loss of its nitrogen content.
Wait, so the farmers are paying a premium on the informal market for a product that is literally degrading in the sun, losing its chemical potency before they even get it into the soil.
Precisely. It's a structural failure between policy design and user reality. The Ministry of Agriculture is finally studying the introduction of 10-kilogram and 25-kilogram bags.
Well, that's a start.
Female farmers and smallholders in regions like Sidama have been actively petitioning for this because it would dramatically improve proper usage and curb that wasteful informal market.
So why not just switch the bags tomorrow? Seems like a no-brainer.
Because economists are warning about the downstream costs. Smaller bags mean higher packaging costs, more complex transport logistics, and more labor to weigh and distribute.
Ah, I see.
The fear is that the extra overhead might make the subsidized fertilizer too expensive to be sustainable for the government budget.
But it's not just a logistical hurdle, right? The paper highlights some deep psychological barriers to this agricultural transition as well.
Yes, modernization requires more than just dropping off supplies. It requires a shift in scientific understanding. In the Gambella region, agricultural officials are reporting that some farmers actively refuse to use chemical inputs entirely.
They believe their soil is naturally blessed, right?
Correct. There is a deep-seated fear that modern synthetic fertilizers will permanently burn or damage the land over time. So the local agriculture bureau is forced to run intensive awareness campaigns just to prove that proper measured application of these chemicals can actually triple their grain output without ruining the soil.
It is such a stark reminder that you can't just mandate modernization from the top down.
No, you really can't.
But if the rural fields are struggling with these supply constraints and logistical frictions, what happens to everyone moving to the city for a better life? That tension brings us back to the capital, Addis Ababa.
Because the ultimate promises of this economic transition, the things people are moving to the city for, are modern housing and urban stability. And right now, according to the reporting, both are facing severe legal and bureaucratic meltdowns.
Yeah, let's look at the title deed squeeze first. Thousands of homeowners in Addis are currently being threatened with losing their property title deeds by the end of June.
It's a very tense situation.
The city's Land Development and Management Bureau is apparently desperate for cash. They have an annual revenue target of 45 billion birr, and they've only collected about 37% of that.
So they are aggressively cracking down on the informal housing market. They're targeting people who bought homes over the last decade but never formally transferred the ownership on the books, specifically to avoid paying the associated transfer fees.
and the city administration is demanding a 6% capital gains and stamp duty fee to finalize those transfers. But wait, hasn't that fee always existed? Why the sudden crisis now?
It's the mechanism of calculation that changed. Historically, the fee was based on the price the buyer and seller declared on their contract.
Okay.
But now, district land offices are ignoring those declared prices and applying their own updated government benchmark prices, which makes the tax burden vastly more expensive for the homeowner.
But critics in the paper are pointing out a massive empathy gap from the government here. We aren't necessarily talking about wealthy investors maliciously dodging taxes.
Not at all.
Buying a home is the largest financial decision of these people's lives. Buyers scrape together every last cent of their life savings just to secure the physical property.
And then the administrative fees become an impossible hurdle.
Exactly. By the time they get to the administrative transfer, they simply have nothing left in the bank. The government is essentially demanding they have tens of thousands of burr on standby before they even think about buying a house.
Right.
And because they don't, they are permanently stranded in the informal sector, legally vulnerable to losing their homes.
It creates a tremendous amount of uncertainty for the working class. But if we are talking about uncertainty in the housing market, the breakdown of Key Housing Finance Solutions PLE check is arguably the most dramatic example in this week's paper.
This story is wild. Key Housing launched with this incredibly publicized promise to build 100,000 affordable homes over 10 years. They were using a rotating savings-based model.
Which mechanically is similar to a traditional AQUA, a community savings circle, but scaled up to a massive corporate level.
Right.
It was designed to widen access for ordinary people who couldn't possibly afford an upfront purchase.
But now, the company is completely eating itself alive. The former deputy CEO, who actually owns a 20% stake in the company, is literally suing his own general manager and his board chairman. The allegations are incredibly severe.
The legal filings suggest a total collapse of corporate governance. The former deputy CEO claims the current management is operating the company like a family-controlled, unaudited piggy bank.
Oof.
More alarmingly, he alleges they are unlawfully trying to use the physical houses, which were built using the subscribers' savings as collateral for entirely separate bank loans.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of that. If the company defaults on those separate loans, the banks will seize the homes as collateral.
Yes.
Which means the ordinary people who trusted this saving scheme will lose everything, even though they paid their dues.
That is exactly the fear, and it's why the home buyers are panicking right now. Two groups of subscribers have already filed separate lawsuits seeking nearly 40 million burr in refunds and compensation.
And they are accusing Key Housing of running what is effectively an illegal pyramid scheme. They allege the company is taking new subscribers' money just to pay off obligations to earlier buyers and failing to provide the performance guarantees that buyers explicitly paid extra premiums for.
It's a complete and total breakdown of institutional trust.
Absolutely.
And that erosion of institutional trust isn't just a private sector problem. It ties directly into a massive public sector story this week. The federal fuel corruption trial at the Lydia division.
Right. 9 defendants are standing trial, including the former Director General of the Ethiopian Petroleum Supply Enterprise and the Deputy Director General of the Petroleum and Energy Authority. These are top-tier officials.
They are. Federal prosecutors are alleging that these officials conspired to unlawfully allocate over 30 million liters of fuel to unauthorized business people.
How does a graft scheme on that scale actually work? Like, 30 million liters doesn't just disappear into someone's pocket.
Well, the mechanics of it involve manipulating the quota systems. By bypassing the authorized distribution channels and allocating that fuel to unauthorized actors, they essentially siphon off massive volumes from the legitimate market to be sold at a premium.
Just completely gaming the system.
Exactly. The government claims this deliberate diversion disrupted national operations, created artificial fuel shortages across the domestic market, and caused millions of burr in direct financial losses to the state.
And the trial's getting incredibly complicated because several of the accused business people are literally on the run. The police haven't been able to locate them despite public summons, so they are amending the charge sheet and splitting the trials.
It's a mess.
It really is. But when you step back and look at it all, whether it's the manipulation of fuel quotas, the collapse of a 100,000 home finance scheme, or the heavy-handed squeeze on title deeds, you see systems that are struggling and sometimes completely failing to maintain their integrity under the immense pressure of rapid economic expansion.
It's the friction of transition. The structural load is simply too heavy for the current administrative foundations.
And that brings us right back to you, the listener. Because all of these macroeconomic policies, these trade deficits, and these corruption trials, they aren't just abstract numbers in a newspaper.
No, they're not.
Think about your daily life. Whether you are a university student rationing your bus trips because traditional transport is collapsing, or a farmer in Sidama trying to keep a tiny tin of fertilizer out of the hot sun, or an EV owner holding your breath while negotiating a battery insurance claim, this grand transition hits your life in deeply personal, often extremely challenging ways.
Which leaves us with a critical and perhaps unsettling question to mull over.
What's that?
We've talked about the friction between the grand vision and the ground reality, but what if this isn't just a temporary growing pain? As this nation attempts to leapfrog into the future, joining global blocs like BRICS and adopting high-tech electric vehicles, are we risking the creation of a permanently bifurcated society?
That's a huge question.
Right. A future where a hyper-connected urban elite live in a 21st century digital economy, while the rural foundation that literally feeds them remains structurally trapped in the struggles of the past.
Wow, that is a heavy thought to sit with. Until the fundamental tracks are built to support the high-speed bullet train, the friction on the ground is only going to get hotter. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the week's reporting. We wish you a great week ahead, and we are officially signing off from the Addis Fortune newsroom. Catch you next time.